So here we are, we're school around us, and thriving relationships are really the heart of learning. And we care so much about our relationships, and we focus so much on learning through thriving relationships with adults and learners and all multi-age group experiences that we create. And for those of you who are new and watching this and maybe wondering what holistic education means to us, we would offer you this humble little Venn diagram, maybe where you can see that we really place our attention on these dimensions of a learner and who they are, their knowledge, their abilities, their self-understanding, and creating learning experiences that attend to these parts of who a learner is through community is tremendously important to us. And so, so that you can hear each of our voices, we're going to each talk a little bit about one part of this and why it's important to us and how we pay attention to it at school around us. So here we are. Amy is going to share what is so important about self-understanding in our way of educating and learning together.
Yeah. So I think if you can, see all those little bubbles, they're pretty amazing qualities that we look to support in our learners. And, they're definitely qualities that might be within any school or educational setting. But I think our approach to making them alive in each of us is really unique. And one of the areas that I really I feel really connected to is the part of authenticity that we focus on, and just how we really work to bring out that unique quality that is in with each of us, and allow that to grow and become just a strength. So when a learner leaves, they really know themselves as an individual and how important those qualities are within each person. But then at the same time, like Lauren spoke to, how community is so important, that each of us learn to be truly who we are, yet support one another to also be who we are. And you learn to build community and learn within that, and where to adapt and support one another in our uniqueness. And the other piece that stands out within this is just our development of that reflective quality that is so essential in being human, of just being able to look at your actions and learn from what the mistakes and the things that we've done, and being able to set goals from that to better ourselves, and that nice relationship of back and forth. And we have times that we're really purposeful, and it's also an ongoing part of what we do when we're developing that reflective sense of self. But those are the two. I mean, all of these I could speak to. They're such great qualities of being human. Don't know if you have any thoughts or wonderings, but we'll get back to that if you do. The other, which you might be familiar with, are knowledge areas, only that you've been to a number of our open houses. But we really work to balance all of these 8 knowledge areas, where oftentimes in educational settings, the reading, writing, and the arithmetic are kind of like at that heartbeat of those knowledge cornerstones. And we have those here within our 8 areas, and they are really important to us, but we don't emphasize them over any of these other pieces. We really believe that all of these are equally important. And really, when these are integrated in our learning, they make meaning, and the knowledge becomes more in like your heart and your mind and in your body. And so that it becomes this whole rounded individual.
Thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring the baton over to Margaret and say, hey, Margaret, what would you like to say about this part of what we care about?
Okay. Um, so the abilities are the things that we have noticed that our learners have when they leave us. That's okay. There are so many circles here. It could be overwhelming for sure to look at. But these come directly out of the knowledge areas and things that we focus on over time. So um, I guess my own personal experience, both of my children went to SAU and for their whole elementary education and are now adults. And so I guess specifically, if I were to highlight one of these abilities, I'd think about the applies mathematical reasoning to life piece, just as an example that might help illustrate. My son was not like a huge math guy ever, but when he was at SAU, he did a lot of building, and building was his thing. He was a very physical kinesthetic learner, always on the move, and he was allowed, I guess. One thing that we do at SAU is meet a learner where they're at, and he was allowed to build, to move, to grow in that way. And as a young person, he built a number of forts, had a number of really interesting structures that he would investigate. And through that process, I think he learned a lot about math. Obviously, he learned all the other skills like adding and subtracting and multiplying and all of those things. But actually, that meaningful part that he applied to his life kind of goes on. He's 26 now. Um, and he has just finished building this incredible house on his own where he planned and he's built a stone house and he planned that process. He figured out how to do that just by reading, by looking at information, by finding books. But, it was an incredible process for him. And I see that as a directly related to what he did at SAU as a child and how he learned that process there. So that's just one example of the abilities that we see in our students when they leave. And then community, of course, is another piece. Just our name, School Around Us, is reflective of that. School in the entire, that circle that Lauren showed in the beginning that surrounds all of our learners, where students have a voice, parents have a voice within our little community. But then there's like reaching out to the local community. We do a lot of things in the local community and bring artists in and musicians. This past week we had a drumming intensive, which was really awesome, where Michael Wingfield came in and Antonia Rocha, a storyteller. So we love to bring people into our little community and then extend our learners out into the local community and the global community sometimes on trip travels and things like that. So community is important, and we're hoping that in the future, in this new iteration of School Around Us, that we're building that even more so, where parents are also coming here as learners in a real way, and that we are supporting our local community in a variety of ways.
Thanks, Margaret.
Sure.
Yeah, so much to say about all this. We're just giving tasters. So this is a part that we also feel really passionate about. And I know Delilah has a really direct experience as a parent. So I'll let you speak to this, Delilah.
Okay, great. A lot of what the educators have talked about so far is what gets developed at SAU, and this is just a piece about how they do it, how we do it, and what it means to be intentional about learning all of those things in a way that people get exposed to it, but also then get a lot of depth. And themes are a great place to get exposed to all kinds of different big topics or experiences, and we'll get to some examples on the next slide. And you'll tend to have regularly each week as well as over time. Is my connection okay? The internet just said connection unstable.
I think it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. And so how, within those themes, those emerge from what the educators are witnessing is an interest of the young people, as well as, they'll do brainstorms. So those really come from the students and then get refined and guided by the educators, versus the ongoing classes. Some of the things you'd really expect that do take building on over time in that mathematical reasoning or learning and writing and reading skills. And I was able to watch my daughter. I'll go over what my daughter in the next two slides, but I guess a third major way of learning things is through play. And Margaret talked about that a little bit with the building structures. But you know, there's times that they're called break, where young people are off playing, but we've never really found the right word to describe all that happens during that. But there's so much learning interpersonal skills and trying things out and following a passion that they have that happens all during that playtime. And that's not unintentional, accidental time. That's really structured into our day. Ready for the next slide. All these themes here. One I was thinking about that my daughter loved, that comes up every 4 years, is government and democracy. Happens during the presidential election years. And 4 years ago, or in 2015, my daughter was 9 and she ran for president, which was a many week long process, and then ended up getting to be president of the school for a week, making decisions and deciding what classes happen. And she just learned a ton of leadership during that and confidence. And she did it again this year, but didn't run for president. She was on a press corps. So she got to write newsletters and articles and, develop the skill areas and the knowledge areas through this theme. And then if you go to the ongoing classes, just to talk about my daughter, who is 13, she loved math all along her 8 years here at SAU, and found times that she needed to dive into an area that wasn't being covered among a larger group of students. So one year she went to the new school and took a class, and another year, this year she's supplemented the math learning with Khan Academy right at SAU during the school day. So, finding something that she had a passion in, making sure that it was developed as much as she wanted to. And another example in here is her reading skills. When she came to SAU, she loved certain things, the logical thinking of math, and she was very committed to learning back handsprings. So she wasn't like an early reader, even though my husband and I love reading. So we were always consulting with Amy, and Amy was like, she's getting all the pieces. There's, you were pretty confident, Amy, that it was that Liliana was taking in all the different pieces of learning reading skills, but not really ready to take that leap. And then when she was 8 and in the middle group that year, there was a book that she really wanted to be able to read that the other students were reading, and she began reading. There was a leap she needed to take, and SAU didn't say, you're ready to take that leap now because you're X age. They just said, we're watching, we're supporting, we're developing, and when she's ready to leap, she'll leap. And she did. And now she's reading a book right now that is this thick, and she could not be happier.
Thanks, Delilah. So such great examples. I'm going to just quickly speak to this question we've been getting a lot of, because we just transformed ourselves after 50 years to being a learning center is how we're identified now, rather than a school. And there's a few reasons, and chief among them is we really are in a new era of our own progressive pursuit of what it means to be a leader in education. And we see the tide changing today in the world. There's a growing trend of homeschooling, and there's a lot more, especially after the last year of life, parents thinking about what does it really mean to educate and to be a participant in my child's learning. And so for us, this designation gives us more freedom and flexibility in the programming that we offer and how we do learning. And it also embodies our value that parents and educators are partnering together as learners, not necessarily doing the same parallel things, right? But there's a real spirit of partnership and responsibility and engagement. And we also get to offer part-time enrollment for families that have more bandwidth to do some of the learning experiences at home and want that. And so that's available to us now as well. And we also can support those families who have preferences around vaccine choice and how they want to schedule that. And that also gives us that freedom. So those are some of our our reasons for being a learning center. And the truth is we're very much school around us in terms of our core values, skills, and personality. And yet this is a way for us to be a little bit more, I think, to evolve ourselves and to speak to some of the things that are coming up in the world today in different ways. So I'll say that really quickly. And then I'll just say, just to emphasize that full-time and part-time, sometimes I get questions. So I'm our enrollment director and I receive questions from families and it's sort of like, well, what, full-time, part-time, can you tell me about that? And so I'll just say really, in summary that full-time is for parents who are drawn to our philosophy, want to support their children's level of learning and have well-rounded skills and knowledge, and they want their child somewhere 5 days a week. And they're working, or there isn't an aptitude or an interest in trying to do some of those learning experiences directly at home. And that's totally fine. That's welcome. And so we have full-time learners and then we have part-time learners. And that is really for families who want to continue doing some of that active homeschooling at home. And they would like their child to have exposure to new learning experiences that they're not creating, other learners, other adults, etc. So that's sort of how we think about who those are for in our new structure. And the last place where we get questions is this, what is it like to be a homeschooling family? Especially if like I'm enrolling my child 5 days a week full time, what does that mean? Am I homeschooling or not? And so Laura, who's our administrative director, is going to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so where SAU is a learning center and not a school, to comply with the main laws regarding compulsory education, our students are required to be registered as homeschoolers. And we support families by providing detailed information throughout the year about this process. Lauren kind of touched on this, but it's important to note that choosing to homeschool doesn't necessarily mean that parents are personally providing all of their child's educational needs. Some families join as homeschoolers, while others, they connect with the holistic education and philosophy here at SAU. There are some specific steps. I'll just briefly go over those. First, parents are responsible for registering their child as a homeschooler with the state, and it's just a simple online form. Then there's providing the actual curriculum and the instruction throughout the year. There are specific state mandated subjects, which we provide through the knowledge, abilities, and self-understanding that Amy spoke about. And I do want to mention there are opportunities for parents and teachers to partner and connect throughout the year. It's not part of the state's homeschool process, but I think it's important to note that there are these regular opportunities to connect with the teachers about your child's growth and the development. Some of these are scheduled more formally, while others are just more like before school, after school, throughout the year at different points. I'm just mentioning this to share how the SAU experience is a really collaborative partnership. The last step in the homeschool process is the assessment piece. And in Maine, there are a couple of options. You can choose a portfolio review by a certified teacher or a standardized test. And at School Around Us, we offer portfolio reviews with our teachers. And the purpose of the portfolio is basically to demonstrate the progress of your child's growth and development throughout the year. And as mentioned before, we walk families through this whole process and provide guidance and mentoring along the way.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, and so just to make that really clear, that there is a portfolio that's maintained by Amy and Margaret for full-time enrolled learners with us, and then that's the portfolio that Amy and Margaret can review and certify at the end of the year, and then a parent can simply submit that to the state. So there's really the word actually that comes up for me is like, there's a really nice concierge experience being a full-time enrolled family at School Around Us of that piece of the puzzle. So that's it.